Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Law and Tech Talk third series at Ricunha Foundations. And first of all, before you usually used to see me as a panel members or as a chair, and today I'm just introducing the event, but also going to make a few announcements, but later. Again, there are some new faces here. This is the third time that we are organizing this Law and Tech Talk. And this first season is on data protection and governance. And the first talk we organized was on AI and data privacy. The second one was on harmonization of data protection law. And this talk of today, which we believe is very interesting and important because of different industries have such kind of requirement of having data protection officers to make sure that data protection policies are implemented within the organization. So that's why we got the honor to have today a great panelist members coming from Macau, but also from Hong Kong, that are going to share today their expertise, their opinion, but also their professional experience dealing with data protection, but also has of data protection officer. So without further ado, I'm not going to, sorry, I'm not going to take longer, but just to also show our gratitude to the our partner, Ricunha Foundation, with who we are organizing this event. So basically, this event is a joint event of University of St. Joseph and Ricunha Foundations. And again, we have more to come next month, the following months, on other topics. But before that, I'm going to give the floor to our moderators that's going to start tonight's talk. And I believe it's going to be a very enriching night. And feel free later to engage in the discussions with the panel member, because this is a very unique opportunity to have a group of experts coming from different parts and different company and organization. And I was jokingly saying that it's also an extension of the women celebrations. As you can see, all the panels are women of tonight, which shows how much women are able to achieve in different fields. Without saying more, I'm going to give the floor to our moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome everyone. Our topic for today, as Duty mentioned, is the journey of a DPO. This panel will provide us a deep dive into the demanding yet rewarding career of a data protection officer in a rapidly evolving legal and technological landscape. Our agenda for today will explore the professional journey of a DPO, from the initial steps of becoming a DPO and the crucial legal, technical, and soft skills needed for the success, the day-to-day life of managing a global or complex data protection compliance program, the GBA, and the practical challenges of achieving cross-border data compliance. And we will also discuss comparative data breach protocols in Macau, Hong Kong, and China. And finally, we'll look at future-proofing the DPO by discussing the urgent intersection of AI governance and the necessity of embedding privacy by design from the start of new projects. So to guide us in the discussion today, we have Chandy, Philippa, and Daniela. Please join me in extending a warm welcome. And maybe I'll start with you, Chandy, if you can introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chandy. I made my way from Hong Kong today. I'm originally from Shenzhen, and I'm a dual qualified PRC lawyer and a Hong Kong solicitor. So sometimes I make a joke about myself. I'm a real Greater Bay Area lawyer because I'm qualified in two different jurisdictions. I've been working with different international law firms and different locations as well, working in Beijing, London, and Hong Kong, and also work with different companies, including Alibaba and SAP. And also now I'm the co-chair of the IAPP Hong Kong chapter and also the vice chair lady for the Cybersecurity Association in Hong Kong. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. First time here in Macau doing this privacy sharing. Very exciting.
Thank you. Philippa?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Philippa. I am Portuguese originally, but I've been living around Asia and Macau in particular since I was 2, with a bit of a hiatus in between. I am a lawyer by trade. I am qualified in Portugal and here in Macau as well. I did a bit of a stint in private practice when I first arrived back in Macau, and then was in-house in one of our gaming operators here. And I currently am working as the Regional Data Protection Officer, so the Regional DPO for the JPAC area for L'Occitane, which is, as you might know, hopefully, a beauty group that's originally from France and celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, where I cover 22 markets, going up from Japan down to New Zealand.
Thank you. Daniela, please.
Hello, everyone. I would like to first say thank you to Fundação Rui Cunha for consistently organizing these amazing talks for our community. And of course, to Doutora Suman for extending your invitation for me to have this opportunity to sit here on this panel alongside the biggest names of data privacy in the GBA region.
Wow.
So for me, I am actually not a DPO, so I'm kind of like an imposter here, despite the title of today's panel being the Journey of the Data Protection Officer. But I am also a lawyer, and I'm qualified in Portugal and here in Macau. And I have consistently worked with different DPOs in various jurisdictions, be it in Portugal, where I originally started my career in 2016, the year of the GDPR. And then I came back here to Macau in 2020, where I worked more consistently with data privacy. And more recently, I've been working more with Hong Kong and China. And also more recently, even in the recent months, I became certified with the CIPP CN certification. So, yes.
Okay, so you kind of jumped into the first question that I had prepared. That is, how did you start your career, or what was the pathway you were pursuing when you've landed into the data privacy or data protection world? Can you share some history of how you reached this?
Sure. So, like I said, I started in 2016. I just finished my master's that had literally nothing to do with what I do currently. Before, I was studying master's in criminal law. And then subsequently, since it was 2016 and I became a trainee lawyer, in Portugal, as a lawyer or as a trainee lawyer, since we were working alongside so many different clients, they lacked a lot of manpower to help these different clients. So they would ask a lot of different trainees from different departments to assist in data privacy projects. And so I was able in that time to assist in those projects. And it was, of course, very, very chaotic, as you can imagine. Maybe you've worked there at the time. And it also provided me with this great experience, this great learning experience. And it showed me that data privacy is much more than just reviewing privacy policies. Perhaps a lot of people here in the audience today may think that privacy is just the privacy policies, but I can assure you that it is much more than that. It is much more advisory in nature, and that is exactly what I like most about the law area, about this law area. And then came back during the COVID, and during COVID, I would say that technology exacerbated. A lot of people were working from home, so we were relying more on technology. People were talking more about these subjects, the technology subjects, and I just continued my career path through that.
Very nice. Felipe, can we hear
I think
about you?
for me it was coincidence, luck, good or bad, depends on the day. So data privacy and the rights relating to data protection and cybersecurity are fairly, as we were mentioning before, something that it's tendentially for the younger generations, for those that are more techie. I've always been quite techie, so even when working in private practice, these subjects came around to me and fell on my lap. Eventually, a little bit later in life, in my previous life, the company I was working for did expand operations into the EU, where we were subject to the GDPR. And that became all of a sudden a really big thing. And somebody needed to take that into their labs and grow it as a baby, and it fell on mine. So that's how it started, and it turned out I really, really like it. It's fun, it's interesting, it's ever-changing. And for me, it gives me a really good opportunity to deal with lots of teams, different perspectives, and to really understand how the business works. And that's where now, after a couple of years doing that as well as my in-house roles, I moved on to a more dedicated one, which expands all the time with new tech and all. But now it's exactly that. I landed in a place where where my main motivation is to help the business grow while still ticking the boxes. But it's more, much like you were saying, it's not just an exercise of ticking boxes. I wish it were. It would be a lot easier on all of us, and we would sleep a lot better at night. But no, privacy and data protection and our rights in relation to that and our obligations as companies does extend a lot more than that. And when you get into the details of privacy by design, and when you're actually helping to mold a business to be respectful of yourself and others, is what I really enjoy about my career right now.
Good. I think I echo your point about the business, because I actually did my first law degree in PRC law and my second degree and master in EU competition law in the Netherlands. And then I went back to China and start my legal career in Hong Kong, start all over again as a common law lawyer. At that time, when I was a law firm, I never known about data privacy because it's before 2016. So nobody have any idea about, oh, that will grow up to be a big topic, until after a few years in private practice, mainly doing the transactional work, M&A, I start to think maybe that's not something I'm interested in. I need to find a new direction. So I have the chance to join Alibaba's product team as an international lawyer, because that's the year of 2017. They're growing very rapidly globally. So at that time, when I talk to some negotiation with a counterparty, they will show me the EU SEC. So they, hey, this is something I want you to sign to get ready for the GDPR compliance. So at that time, even my supervisor, who is also a very experienced lawyer, we learned together to pick up the GDPR and learn it line by line and say, oh, well, how we can get ready for this GDPR compliance. So it's a very special occasion how I become a data privacy lawyer. And then that's a key year, it's the 2019. At that time, I was part of the SAP's China cybersecurity compliance team. That's the year when the PRC government, the CAC authority, start to draft the first PIPL, the Personal Information Protection Law. So we have the chance to provide feedbacks through the local commerce, the EU commerce, to provide our feedback as an EU company about our view. We try to minimize the gap between the GDPR and the PIPL. So I start to get to know about the China data protection law in the year 2019. And so that's how I grow together with the business as well, because when you do business in China, SAP is a German headquartered company. You need to use the GDPR as the baseline, and then you need to prepare for the local data privacy law. So I think that's the way you learn, because the business is requiring you. You cannot wait. So I do encourage people who are interested in this, do get to know better about a business and get ready for the new legal landscape. Yeah.
Yeah, it's essential to understand how the business works, to be able to advise and offer solutions. And I think it's also very clear that the turning point here was the GDPR, because it basically mandated that certain companies with certain processing activities are required to have a DPO, whereas before it was more a work that you would do on the sidelines, eventually reviewing some policies and consents, but then you would jump into the real work. But with the GDPR, it really became, and with the extraterritorial effect mainly, and having like companies in the US going crazy with the GDPR and trying to understand how it would apply to them. And then I would also say the PIPL, right? Because the PIPL also has this requirement for some certain companies to have a DPO, and it kind of goes par and pass. I would say that China and EU are basically doing the paveway in relation to what are the privacy regulations and cybersecurity regulations around the world. I think it's the two big blocks currently, even though they are kind of similar, the GDPR and PIPL, but being applied in places, in countries that are so different, the way the law is interpreted and applied and enforced is necessarily different. But I think we agree that the GDPR here was a turning point, I think, around the globe. So looking back, also, what do you think are the skills that are required from a DPO, like legal knowledge, technical acumen, soft skills like communication and stakeholder management? How do you see, or what are the skills that you think are key in being able to advise in this field of data protection, or being a DPO internally inside an organization?
So for me personally, when I started my career, I was more or less fresh out of college despite doing the master's first. So of course I would revert to my factory settings and I would rely a lot on my legal skills, on my legal knowledge, always researching case law to assist the partners at the time during the projects. But while I was progressing my career and I was able to work with different clients, it made me realize as well that other skills were as important or perhaps even more important than my legal skills. Because the tech skills, like you said, are extremely relevant because it allows us to truly understand the technical risks underlying the business. And then the communication part that you were mentioning regarding the soft skills is also extremely relevant because we need to understand the business first before we can even advise them. Because a lot of times there is a cliche in compliance that the business and the compliance team are not the best of friends because business will always want to do everything and then compliance will be the ones telling them, no, you cannot do that. So we need to bridge the gap between these two. And the way we can do this is through communication. It's through empathy. We need to understand what they need to do to be able to advise them and to be able to provide them with solutions to mitigate the risks. And that's why I believe that all the skills that you just mentioned are extremely relevant for a good DPO.
I agree. Picking up on that is like, I kept on saying, and it's legal is always considered a department of no, but data protection is the department of no way always. We're always, I mean, they didn't like me when I was a lawyer, and they really don't like me now that I'm coming from data protection. So it is really important to pick up on that. And what I tried to do and working with the teams is make them understand that it's not a department of no or not a department of no way. It's a department of yes, if. So that communication skill of being able to translate what the requirements are into something that the teams who have no idea what law is, what the requirement says, and half the time don't understand what's written on there, it's that translation, the skill of being able to communicate the requirement, but giving them a solution. It's not just, saying, oh, the law says this. They would just say, fantastic, but then what? What then? So giving them an action point. Another interesting thing is, it's always a big debate of whether the DPO should be a legal professional, should be an IT professional, a risk professional, whatever it is. A DPO cannot work by themselves. It really has to be almost like a village effort, to the extent that I myself say that my best friend is my information security team. I can give them all the requirements, but unless they can verify them for me or help me verify, I can't do that part. So I really need to do that. So it's building also a relationship of trust, not only with your stakeholders, the one that want to get that out and now, and they want to get all the data possible and not have anyone tell them to tone it down, but also with the people that you need to work on your teams, your extended teams, the information security, the business teams, the marketing teams. So that's really important as well. And in particular for my role, and I suppose for both of you who do deal with many cultures, many jurisdictions, is also a lot of intercultural sensitivity. To be aware that the way we have to talk to someone in Hong Kong is actually quite different from Macau or even China. And if you factor in Malaysia's, Japan's, even Australia's, it gets really complicated. So that's cultural sensitivity for me, I think is also a very big plus as a skill for a DPO.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with your view. I think it covered most of the point I want to share about how to becoming a data privacy lawyer. But just one point I want to ask is about the communication part. Because when I worked with Alibaba, we said that the most successful lawyer is like you're sitting in the same boardroom with other stakeholders. Nobody can tell you are a lawyer. You should be part of them. You shouldn't be the one to say all the legal requirements. They don't want to listen to that. As exactly what Philippa said, they want to know the solution, how to shape the product together with the team. So at that time, I do find the learning curve becoming the product counsel at Alibaba because they're really fast-paced. Today, we received a phone call. The BU said, I want to set up a live streaming platform. Please, I want to get it ready within a few days. Oh, okay. So I need to think about what's the issues I want to prepare, all the chat lists, add all the legal stuff. They don't care about this stuff. They always just want to get it done. So you need to really stay together with the product, with the business to understand the goal, and also provide them with the solution and do the risk-based approach and also be frank with them. Yeah, and now because I'm the vice chair lady of a cybersecurity association in Hong Kong, I'm very proud to tell my friends that now I'm the only lawyer in Hong Kong who know most of the cyber IT guy. And whenever I start a conversation with them, they don't feel that I'm the lawyer because they feel that I can speak the same language with them. So I think that becoming a data privacy professional, you really need to learn the language and then speak over different stakeholders, becoming the really savvy on the communication part.
And create the relationships with the
trust.
technology people so that you can both trust each other. But I would just like to add that on the part of the communications, of course, I think enable the solution is the word. There are some times that we just have to say no, not this way, but maybe any other way. We can maybe do it differently, try to achieve a same purpose. But all these programs are costly. Having a cybersecurity program, having a privacy program in place in a company, it costs money because you need technology and you need people and you need experts, so on and so forth. So you also need to be able to communicate to the senior management. You should be able to be in the room with everyone and not being a lawyer, but you should also be able to be in a room with the senior management for them to buy in and make them aware, because without their support, and I think that's what happens in most of the small and medium companies. There's no budget for that, so no one is looking after privacy or cybersecurity. They have few maybe cloud solutions and these and that. No one looking really into whether or not the data is protected and safe. And so if you are in like a bigger organization, I would say that having the ability also to communicate above yourself and getting everyone into the same thinking and make them understand why it's important, so on and so forth, so that then the things can happen at the level where they should happen. So now in practical terms, because we have been discussing a bit in theoretical terms, what does the DPO does? What's the day-to-day life of a DPO? Maybe I start with you, Philippa. That's now the DPO for so many areas and countries.
What is it that we don't do is better question. So I think it's quite interesting because the range of what a DPO does is actually quite broad, to the extent that we both deal with the strategy. So how are we going to take the framework? How are we going to put it in place? How are we going to take it forward? How are we going to get that buy-in? And that's a lot of thinking, policy writing, strategizing as a whole. Then you have a more operational level, which to be fair, consumes a lot more time than I would like to, because I like the strategy and the thinking and the grand plan. But it's when your business comes to you, I want to do this. How can I do it? Can I do it this way? And so that advice of understanding, helping develop, answering very operational questions of what does the law say? Can we keep this for 30 years? No, you need to keep it for like 6 months. That's it, no more. But why? And you go into this conversation. A little bit not so present in Asia, I have to say, is the data subject requests. So one of the rights that we have overall globally is the right for individuals to reach out to companies and try to understand what data is held by them, and then have a few other rights, depending on which are broader depending on where you are, but from asking for data to be corrected, to be deleted, for them to be forgotten, for that data to be passed on to someone else. So that usually comes into either the customer service teams, so there's a lot of liaison with them as well into answering. Not so often, but it does happen. We have to also deal with the regulators. So it's not just internally, and not just internally and externally with my data subjects, but also with the regulators. And then a lot of hand-holding, to be fair. But a lot that takes time is incident response as well. So even if half the time these are security incidents that are more on this information security team, it's always right next door with heart in hand, waiting to understand whether there's data involved, where it is, how we have to act. So it is quite a broad function. And honestly, it's usually, I think that half the time it's, in my case, a one-woman team, but it is really a job for multiple people. And so what I do just as well is, instead of having, I don't have a formal team, let me put it that way. So we've created a network of privacy champions. So I'll have it within the business or within the markets, someone who I can talk to as a point of contact, who can reach out, and who locally the people also know. So that's also a bit of a team management to an extent as well. So that is yeah, I can literally start with drafting a policy and ending with sitting next to my InfoSec CISO, regional CISO, biting my nails to say, did they get in? Are we okay? Is it just a scare? So yeah, it's an interesting, very up and down day sometimes.
Yes.
Maybe I just add one point about as a typical DPO working for the Chinese company in China, because the Chinese authority taking care of the data privacy is CAC. Usually at this time, 6, 7 o'clock on Friday night, that's the moment they release the new draft, they release the new law. So most of my DPO friends, they cannot have Friday night plan because they need to sit there waiting for any signals, any new law coming. You know that, right?
I do.
That's the habit. And usually it's before the long holiday. It's like before the Chinese New Year holiday or before the national holiday. That's the moment. I don't know why, but that happens. So that's very special with the DPO in China. Yes.
So I don't have a lot more to add to what Felipe and Chandy were just saying. In Macau, it is not strictly required to have a DPO. So a lot of organizations here in Macau, sometimes they don't have a DPO. So they will outsource that function to us as external counsel, and we do advisory work, but not just that. We also review privacy policies. We also assist them in submitting the notification to our regulator, because as you probably know, when a certain controller has data processing activities in Macau, they are required to submit a notification to the Personal Data Protection Bureau. So we assist them on that. It is a lot of communication, like what you were saying, and mostly communication, I would say, to try to also understand the business and try to understand the new product or the new service and try to advise as much as possible. And also, unfortunately, a lot of data breach reports, advisory, because in Macau, it's not always required to do a reporting. So we advise whether or not they should report, what type of report they should do, the contents, etc. And yeah, that's our day today.
Yeah, it's a busy day for a DPO. I would say if you are a one-woman show in the organization, handling from starting with reviewing contracts to consents to filing notifications, responding to requests, responding to cyber incidents. Well, to respond to cyber incident, you need like a team of people looking over everything. It's I think one of the most challenging parts. Okay, so now going into GBA, we are GBA now. Apparently, three jurisdictions, right? So 3 legal regimes, and so we 3 experts here. I would maybe invite Daniela to start with a brief overview of the legal regime, the framework in Macau in terms of data protection.
So in terms of data protection, the main legislation is the Personal Data Protection Act, the PDPA. It is much more simpler in comparison to China because it foresees the basic principles. It will not tell us very specific terms about the types of security measures that you need to apply, the different measures that you need to apply for to legitimize data transfers. It is much more simpler in that regard. So that is the main piece of legislation. More recently, we have been trying to harmonize in relation to China. And more recently, there were some changes also in the notification forms. But yeah, that's mostly it in relation to the Macau framework.
Yes. Felipe, in relation to Hong Kong.
Kong.
I was just thinking that the fact that we have so little rules around data protection creates a lot of difficulties in the real world because the situations are so detailed, and then you have to deal with them applying a principle, and then the business will challenge that because you are applying a principle to a tiny thing that they want to do. And for me, I think if we would have a more prescriptive legal framework with more detailed rules, there would be things that would be easier to at least justify. Well, it's here because the law gives us some general guidelines, but that it's absent in so many, it's silent in so many areas. But then we see all these regulations around the world and think, well, if it's not allowed anywhere, why would it be here? Just because there's no rule, there should be something here that would cover this situation. Usually it's a principle or a concept of the legislation. So it was just that I was going to
It's a lot of interpretation work for the DPO. And since it's so vague, we don't have so much detail like in China. A lot of the times when we don't know about a specific thing or when it is ambiguous, we have to rely on the Personal Data Protection Bureau to perhaps help us on that analysis. And we do sometimes call them a lot to obtain that analysis, but it is not a formal analysis, and we have to, of course, write them and for them to write us back to obtain that formal view. But sometimes it's just not very timely. If you've worked here, you know that if you write to the PDPB, they will take a while to respond to our requests.
Yes, I think Hong Kong has the same issue. There's not many detailed rules and regulations.
Yes, but I think the difference between Hong Kong, well, there's many, but the main difference in terms of how the regulator approaches this is, yes, the law in Hong Kong, very similarly to the one in Macau, it does, cover main principles. It's a little bit more detailed, I would say, but then it has quirkiness. For example, data transfers. There is a section in the ordinance that addresses how the rules for the transfer of data. It's not operational. So it's there, but it's not operational. You don't have to comply with it. So in the end, it's written, but it's not. But for me, the main difference and what I find more helpful with the Hong Kong regulator is the vast issuance of guidelines, not so much instructions. So half the time, these guidelines, actually, all of the guidelines are non-binding, non-mandatory. They do have a caveat that if you are found not to be compliant, they may take it against you. But that's as far as you get, which is also a bit complicated to get the business to, well, if it's not mandatory, well, yes, but they kind of is, because if we get in trouble, they're going to take it against us. But there is a bit more guidance. So, for instance, one of the areas where they're very specific and where they have extensive documentation is on employment-related matters, so the treatment of employee data, and some on consumer. To be fair, on the data transfers, once again, there is a guideline that talks about the measures that should be implemented for the cross-border transfer of data. But again, then the argument is very complicated because the law says it's not in force, but then you have all of this guidance that says exactly what the law says. So it's a bit, it could be cleaner, but it gives us a bit more guidance than I think the Macau regime does. But overall, it's still, I think it's a very good regulation. The regulator, I think, has become more active or more visible. I think they've always been active, but more visible towards the public, which is also beneficial. Trying to get to maybe eventually to the level of Singapore. Singapore, the regulator is very active, very present, very communicative with the privacy community. But they're taking steps toward that in Hong Kong, and so it is a step up from Macau, I think, but definitely not as much as it is in China.
Because the Hong Kong PDPO is based on the OECD principle. It's been there since in the 90s, so it's been there for a long time. I know that they always want to amend the PDPO, including the compulsory data breach notification, but it's still on the way. But probably I can share a bit about China.
Yeah, but it's interesting because China was the last to come with the privacy law, because Macau had since 2005 and Hong Kong, I don't know since when, but
1998.
So many years,
Yes.
1998, and then suddenly China appears in 2020 or 2019.
Because China is looking at the
as
EU
like
GDPR.
the big
Yeah.
framework, and I thought eventually it would have some impact in Macau and Hong Kong, that suddenly Macau and Hong Kong will start enacting more detailed regulation, but not yet. But just please give us an overview of
Well, overview about the landscape in China is a bit difficult within a few minutes.
Yes,
because it's just complicated. I was sharing with my fellow speakers that I gave a 3-hour lectures last week to the university at the City University of Hong Kong, just about data compliance in the GBA. And 3 hours is not enough. So it would took, as you, Daniela and Philippa mentioned, is way too complicated for the landscape in China. But put it simple, the Personal Information Protection Law, the PIPL, was effective in 2021, so it's relatively young. But they have really focusing on the cross-border data transfer. Nowadays, whenever I talk to people, not with the lawyers, maybe IT cyber, they also ask me, like always say, is there a cross-border data transfer within the GBA? Because GBA, there are 3 different jurisdictions. So they want to understand more how to comply with all those data flow restriction. So I think the GBA-SC, we call it Greater Bay Area Standard Contract, provide a facilitation for the data flow within this area. That's a really good facilitation measures. But according to my statistics I have, as of November last year in Hong Kong, there are only about 100 GBA-SC signed. So we know that most of this GBA-SC was signed by those companies in the medical, banking, finance, only in a few sectors. It's not like for general public. So we do want the government to promote more about how this GBA-SC can help business doing business in the GBA area to facilitate the data flow. But I understand because this GBA-SC, we have some restriction, especially just restricted to the GBA area, not go to Shanghai or Beijing, and also only limited to personal data. If you touch on important data.
It's
It's a
all
very
data.
complicated topic. If you touch on important data, okay, you cannot use this GBA-SC. So I would say the PIPL is complicated, but now we can prioritize the cross-border data transfer for now for the GBA area, how we can make most of this GBA-SC facilitation for the business.
And so how do you ensure compliance? Because we now have a situation where cross-border data transfers using these SCC or the standard contractual clauses are possible between certain cities in mainland China and Hong Kong, and then within certain cities in mainland China and Macau. But now we don't have the dialogue established between Macau and Hong Kong. So it does not complete the flow. If you have like a three-party situation, and then there are restrictions with additional transfers when you use those mechanisms. So it's not like you can use Hong Kong and then China to pass the data over to Macau or the other way around. So how do you deal with this?
Well, I can share a bit about my project experience working with the Hong Kong Airport Authority on some system development, because probably you know that now the driver can drive the car down from Guangdong, the GBA, down to you park the car in the Hong Kong airport and take the flight leaving from Hong Kong. So before they make the trip, they need to book the car park through the system. So that will trigger the data flow between mainland China and Hong Kong. So that's the part about, as you mentioned, the data flow between mainland China and Hong Kong. And also that project involved Macau as well, because driver in Macau, probably Philippa, you know very well. Yeah, the same thing. So you need to follow the legal regime for the data flow between Macau and Hong Kong. So this big thing's very complicated because you say there's no tri-party arrangement. So you always need to look at both the end parts of the data flow and to make sure that you use the right data flow restriction or the framework. Yeah, it is the situation nowadays. But I know that I think the PCPD in Hong Kong signed some kind of memorandum with the PBPD in Macau last year.
For cooperation,
Yes,
for a straighter cooperation.
But
Yes.
that's about it for now. So.
We hope that there will be a new facilitation
Yes.
coming up, cover Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong, the three parts. Yeah.
And until then,
Until then, we treat
we have
each
to
one
use
as
our
each one.
imagination to
It's,
try to solve some.
Sometimes the easiest way is just don't do it, which is impossible. And as you mentioned, when there is such a move towards integration of the region, it's very complicated to deal with these practical issues that just come up. So it really means us being creative or being very boring, because it's the exact same solution that we have to always do separately and treat them as a completely, entirely different jurisdictions, markets, and conditions. It doubles the work, to be fair. I think we would all be happy if it would be a bit more
Unified.
harmonized, or at least
Or you adopt the best
simplified.
practice.
Exactly. At
Yeah.
least a common standard that would apply to the three or to the region as a whole, but practically, not
I
just
think
in
the
theory.
PIPL is very tricky. Just one point, for example, the legal basis for the collection of personal data doesn't have legitimate interest.
Yes.
That's the key difference between PIPL and GDPR.
Yes.
It makes a business really suffer.
Yes.
Probably you know best.
Yes, it does. It does, and it's also one of the issues. I mean, it's not just the fact that we don't have tri-party agreements or multilateral instruments. Is that then the requirements, in particular, of the PIPL? Sorry, because in comparison to both the Macau and the Hong Kong Hong Kong ordinances, it's we're still in the baby phase of data protection. Although it's still a lot better than not having anything. And the principles, like you said, do allow us to expand, which is intro to law 101, right? So we know that, but it is very hard to keep up with these more strict requirements. So we end up, at least on our side, the only way that we have is to level up to the higher standard. So if there was, in fact, some guidance on what would be a guiding line for us to use, for us to make that integration also at the I wouldn't say at the legal side, but at least at the practical side, that would be very, very helpful.
Or have some transfer mechanisms
Yes.
the same way we do in Europe. There are transfer mechanisms for companies to share data across the board, and you comply with certain requirements, and that's possible. And I think that's what that's the aim for the standard contractual clauses between China and Hong Kong and China and Macau. But it does not solve other cross-border data transfers, and it does not also address the issue between Macau and Hong Kong. So in Macau, we also need to be creative, right, to
Yeah, me
address
too.
those issues.
For transfers, I believe that Macau is perhaps the simplest of them all. The basic rule is that we need the regulator's assessment on the level of security of protection of data in the recipient jurisdiction. But even then, we can just forego of that rule, and we can just rely on a legitimate basis for the transfer of data plus a notification to the regulator. So basically, if we just obtain the data subjects an ambiguous consent based on, of course, a prior information about the transfer, and then we do the notification to our regulator, it should be fine. We can, of course, already do the transfer. But when we need to cooperate with other jurisdictions, what we need to do usually is just to adapt ourselves to the highest standard between all of the jurisdictions.
Okay, so now moving into cyber incidents, and what would you say are the biggest differences in notification thresholds and response speed across the three jurisdictions? Maybe I'll start with you.
With me. So I'm happy to say that for Hong Kong and Macau, we're generally very happy people with limited notification obligations, although existing. From the Hong Kong side, so it's always interesting because you can have a security incident that involves data protection, personal data, but you can also have an incident that does not touch personal data at all. So the system that can be attacked or the leak that might happen might or might not touch with person's name, emails, addresses, so all of the personal data. And that starts with, it's already there, a distinction where we have to make and who are the regulators that we need to be looking at or talking to or analyzing. In Hong Kong still, it's only a recommendation for a notification.
Strongly encouraged.
Strongly encouraged. Yes, but that's about as strong as it gets.
And excuse me, does that apply under the cybersecurity law or under the personal
data
law?
The PDPO.
The PDPO.
So for the PDPO companies only, there's no strict notification requirement.
Exactly. So if it's just a thing where you're dealing with and this is why you have to analyze what regulators you're dealing with, and obviously depending on the industry sector that you're working on. I mean, I'm just talking about the data protection regulator and the cybersecurity regulator, which sometimes are one and the same, but then you might need to think about your sectorial ones. So the banks will need to talk to all their financial regulators. You'll have, say, the casinos in Macau would need to, I'm sorry, this is more your area, but still, they would need to consider any regulatory notifications to the local DICJ. So you also have to also think about those. This is why it is possibly the most complicated area of the interaction of a DPO. So whenever there is an incident, we're always very much hoping that it's just something on the tech side, that there is no data involved, and that we don't have to think about all of those other issues. But again, in Hong Kong side, it's strongly encouraged, very much recommended, and they will ask questions if it does come out. So if it's known, the regulator will come and ask, what happened and why didn't you tell us? And so we also adopt sometimes a very much more informal, proactive approach of just talking to the regulator informally rather than sending in a notification. A very different story is, as we know, have a new law in Hong Kong just came into force this year. That's again, fortunately or unfortunately, but I think it's fortunately for now for a test period that will expand. But we do have a critical infrastructure ordinance that came into force earlier this year. that applies to critical infrastructure companies. So, say transportations, banking. Those are the first lines. The goal, as I understand, is for an expansion eventually to other critical industries and sectors. But for now, it's yeah, it's limited. But that does impose quite stringent, not only standards, but also notification requirements to the local applicable regulators. We also now have the creation of a specific regulator just to oversee the cybersecurity aspects of Hong Kong, whereas it didn't exist up until recently. So it's this is new. It's still being implemented. I have to say that the government and the regulators did an incredible job of trying to get the message across and explaining and trying to deal and talk to the businesses and the sectors to make sure that it was feasible and practical. So that was very good. And we see that to an extent also in Macau. I think once again, but I'll put it of this distinction of what we have and also in China of what is just a cybersecurity incident or a security incident and a data protection one as well.
I want to just add one thing about the cybersecurity law in Hong Kong, because we are proud that finally we have our first ever cybersecurity law in Hong Kong, effective 1st of January, and have the new organization, as you said, established under the police force. Because the organization that I'm attached to, we have been very closely with the regulator when they start to have this legal framework for this cybersecurity law about 1 or 2 years ago. So I heavily involved in the consultation period and also provide advice on the incident reporting as well. Because at the beginning, we saw the draft. It actually stipulates the personal data leakage could be one of the base for your computer system incident reporting. And then I wrote my feedback saying that, hey, personal data, would it be some overlapping scope with the PCPD, the commissioner in Hong Kong taking care of the personal data protection? So ultimately, they changed the term. They don't use personal data. They use digital sensitive data. Could cover business data and personal data. So it's a very good development because they want to, because their focus is not really personal data protection. Their focus is the business continuity. Yeah, that's for the stability of the city. So I would say, but in the future, when I explain to my peer data professional friends, I would take, actually in Hong Kong, there's no mandatory incident or personal data leakage reporting. But wait, for this CI law, the Critical Infrastructure Cybersecurity Law, there is a computer system incident reporting requirement. Could involve personal data leakage. You need to do the assessment. So make things a bit more complicated, I would say. Yeah.
What is the time period during which you should notify the authorities in Hong Kong?
24 hours.
24 hours.
The strictest.
Wow,
most serious situation, you need to report within 24 hours. But in the first draft, it's 2 hours.
Well, now I have to say that Macau is actually more stringent than that. If under the cybersecurity law and the ancillary regulations, if a cybersecurity incident is regarded as serious, actually you need to report in 12 hours. Which I'm very surprised that for the first time in this conversation, Macau is being more stringent.
Wait, China.
30 minutes.
China, 30 minutes.
More stringent than Hong Kong, at least.
Because China just released a new regulation last year. The shortest period requirement for the most serious incidents, 30 minutes.
But now the key question, I think, when do you start to count those 30 minutes or 12 hours or
Detection.
24 hours? Detection or confirmation, because there's so much work that goes into confirming exactly what happened. For you to confirm that actually someone came in and did something wrong there or took something out, right? So I think there's always this discussion because 30 minutes is from the moment you detect is impossible to
But usually
notify.
it's the other way around. It's the regulator. They already know about
they
it.
already know.
They'll inform you, hey, you have some cyber
Are you
incident.
okay? We heard, we saw. Are you okay?
And those 30 minutes from detection, and then it's a verbal report, or is it already a written
They have a
report?
prescribed form for you to submit.
And those 30 minutes are counting from the moment they call you to say, we also detected there's something going on in your network.
Could be.
But it is. You're right. It in practical terms for business.
Because you would try to delay until you find
But the
out
thing
more
is,
about what
and the
went
fact
wrong,
is
because you're
always-
also trying to manage the damage, right?
And we're always telling, and I'm telling you, I always tell the teams, like, really be careful of what the words you're using. It's an alleged breach. We don't have a suspected. It might be a thing, but we have that often enough. And sometimes it's in these situations where you're supposed to communicate when you detect. Okay, and
So just so that I'm clear, you need to from the detection moment, not from the incident.
We have confirmation. So for China is detection. Correct.
But for China, it's keep it vague. Doesn't really have that clear cut. Have the wording there, starting from hey, this is the time when the time's clicking. It's not that. Yeah. Usually you need to do the preliminary
analysis.
Preliminary analysis,
Yes.
and you don't start counting the 30 minutes yet, or you do?
What they will call you.
Or
and
just
then
if they call
once
you.
they call you, you're done. You have to count it anyways. But it's from a very practical perspective and a business perspective as well, is that sometimes it's just nothing. And you think you've mobilized all of this notification to a regulator it can be something as simple, and it's happened to us once or twice, where it was a miscommunication between ourselves and our vendors, that they didn't tell us that they were going to do some penetration test, and all of a sudden
there was no incident. That's why I was asking about the confirmation.
We're always trying to be very careful, and it's I think unreasonable, even if it specifically says that you have from detection. I think you have to interpret that as meaning some degree of investigation into it, because, like I said, it can be effectively nothing. It can be just a miscommunication where something is going on from the part of a good threat actor, or just your partner that's actually testing their systems in accordance with what you have with them, or if there's an actual problem. So there is a degree of a little bit of salt that you always have to put on there to make sure that you're also not overreacting, both internally and externally.
I think the Macau cybersecurity law allows for some interpretation there, because I don't think it refers to detection. I think
the
it refers
detection is actually, it depends on the sector. Philippa more or less already summarized the Macau legal regime when she was talking about Hong Kong. So the PDPA will not tell us to do any type of reporting, not to the authority, not to the affected individuals. The only reporting really expressed in law would be under the cybersecurity law, and only in relation to the operators of critical infrastructures. So those that are operating in critical areas like finance, health, gaming, etc. And even under the cybersecurity law, there's actually two types of reporting that needs to be done. One in relation to CARIC, which is the supervisor of cybersecurity in Macau, and the other one to the relevant authorities. And when I said detection, it was actually in relation to the financial sector, because the AMCM, the Monetary Authority of Macau, has issued a specific guideline for the reporting of major emergencies. And pursuant to that, the word that they were using specifically is the detection of the emergency. And the first reporting under the financial sector is actually 2 hours from detection, but a little bit less stringent than in China, because it can be verbal. They can just call the AMCM, and that could be just the first reporting. The second after 24 hours. But
with more details.
With more details.
You've done the investigation.
Exactly.
And then
some types of measures that we have already implemented, persons affected, potential losses, etc. But under the cybersecurity regime, in relation to CARIC, we need to first classify the incident, and only in relation to the serious incidents would we have the 12 hours mark. And for less serious incidents, 24 hours. So it is a little bit up to interpretation, because we first need to classify the incident. So in a sense, in practical terms, it may not really translate into the 12 hours that I just mentioned.
It's not easy. And I would assume in your world it would even involve like going over all the jurisdictions, see where are these
No.
people that has been impacted from and what are the notification requirements in all these other jurisdictions.
It becomes complicated because it's already complicated within the GBA.
Yes.
If you add in the rest of APAC and if you even consider the rest of the world, it's always, the first question is always, where are the servers and whose data was on there? And you go from there. And then we have regulators as nice as Singapore that do give us, say, 30 days to investigate. Malaysia says you need to notify immediately, so it's not even 30 minutes, it's immediately. Or if you can't do that, then we give you like 72 hours, but that's okay. But it's a vast disparity of regulators to make happy, keep happy, and regulations to keep up with. So it really is necessary for us, from a business perspective, for business continuity as well, to have plans, response plans in place that everybody
Yes.
knows what to do, when, and how. Otherwise, it can become very chaotic very fast.
And it will be chaotic. even
Anyway,
with the
it will
plans.
be chaotic anyway, yes.
Okay, thank you. So now let's discuss a little bit about AI and the issues the use of AI raises in relation mainly to personal data protection. We don't have, again, that many guidelines in Macau.
None
Our
at all.
last resort is, again, Macau personal data protection and
course,
our
and the cybersecurity law.
creativity.
Yeah. No, actually, everyone knows. I believe that everyone here in this room today may use AI to some extent. So AI is, of course, has its own vulnerabilities. I don't trust AI 100%. I will never put sensitive data into AI tools because I don't trust it 100%. So the role of the DPO would, of course, before implementing a new AI system into the organization, it is very much required to first do a due diligence to ensure that the AI tool that he wishes to implement effectively is inside the risk appetite of the organization. And following that, of course, the DPO needs to do a lot of training within the organization to train the employees, to make them aware of the use of the AI, how to use it responsibly, how to navigate the risk of using that AI tool specifically. But in Macau, like you were saying, Grace, there's really no specific regulation on AI. We are still using the PDPA or the Macau cybersecurity law to navigate this new topic.
And again, cross-border data transfer is a
Yes,
bottleneck.
of course.
Every now and
Yeah.
then. So in Hong Kong, what is I know the regulator is more active in terms of issuing guidelines.
Yes, and they have, at the same, there is no AI law in Hong Kong, at least not yet.
Not yet. And no plan.
No plan, exactly, not yet, and maybe not for a while. But of late, and especially with the advent of, say, DeepSeek and the availability of a lot of the other AI agents and tools that are available to business, they have issued quite a few. One, they have promoted the awareness of the public in terms of what using AI means. They've issued quite a few
AI model framework.
exactly. They have the model framework, and they also have issued
For
specific
employees.
guidelines, exactly, for, once again, for employees and employee use. It's a very specific target that we do, or target audience in Hong Kong. But with that, and that's, I found it, I think it's very commendable as well, is the number of trainings and that they have developed, similar to almost the level of what they did with the critical infrastructure ordinance as well. But for AI, they did promote a very close awareness and training with the individuals. And to make them aware of the risks of its use. But once again, it's still very much encouraged to follow, yet still no particular rules and regulations exactly. So once again, we fall back also to the data privacy and protection regulations and laws and ancillary documentation. But I think that's in that aspect, the Hong Kong has also made a big effort on promoting the use of AI, which also comes with the fact that they have also issued the guidelines on the models and the frameworks. And from a business perspective, it is a very powerful tool in terms of productivity, in terms of efficiency if used well. But then the risks that come with them are also interesting to analyze and to consider. And it has once again to fall in, like you very well said, with the risk appetite level of a company. So for us, for instance, we did encourage, and the company does encourage the use of AI, but we go through all of the very tight assessments of all of our solutions. We do not recommend the use of some, and we've also invested quite a bit of time and effort on training, internal training on the use, especially because we all know that even if it's not for a work context, people will be using it on a personal context, and that exposes them as well. And that's, I think, something that we don't think about is how much we feed the AI tools with our personal information and how easily it can get out there as well. So it is a very interesting balance from the side of the business as well. From the regulatory standpoint, we're still a little bit okay as well.
Yes, I have the chance to attend a seminar organized by the PCPD, and the commissioner actually asked the audience, do you want a comprehensive AI legislation like the EU AI Act? Nobody raised their hands because Hong Kong is the hub to deploy AI. We are not the hub to develop AI. So that's why the commissioner think probably there's no urgent need to have this comprehensive AI law for Hong Kong. But the situation could be different for China. Because last night I was pulled into the online discussion with a few academia because they are having a very heated discussion about whether we should follow Vietnam. Because Vietnam have the AI law now. So whether China should follow Vietnam to have the AI law. And then I think the academias also raised the point. Now US and China, they really head to head during this AI competition. We shouldn't just easily roll out something like the EU AI Act. So now the situation about the AI legislation, I would say, is piecemeal. Even though China is the first country to have this AI legislation about a few years ago, it's called interim measures. Still called interim measures after a few years. But it's focused on Gen AI, more about the content safety.
And it's mostly recommendations, right? It's
a compulsory.
It's strict.
Strict.
Okay.
Yes. So we're very proud that we are the first country have this mandatory AI requirement, but it's only focused on Gen AI and focused on the content safety. And after that, we roll out some algorithm filing, large language model filing. It's all about control. So before you release to the general public, you should do the filing. You should get the approval from the regulator. Actually, this morning I saw there's the enforcement news from Hainan, the local regulator there. They released some penalty to the company, didn't do any filing for the algorithm. So we are now seeing some enforcement actions on this. But according to my observation, probably we won't release any comprehensive AI law like the EU or Vietnam very soon, because we always need to strike the balance, right? Yeah.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot already. Any advice for anyone wanting to be a DPO?
So since we are talking about DPO, which is intrinsically related to technology, I believe the most important thing that they need to be aware of is to adapt and to constantly be learning, be it at the beginning of the career or at the end of the career. It is always very important to do that.
That continued learning, because technology keeps going everywhere, and we are only trying to catch up with the technology speed.
I have to say that on that, sometimes the number of tabs that I have open on articles to read is a bit daunting even to myself, but that's right. It's every single day we have, either because it's Friday 5 p.m. and there's new law coming somewhere, or new regulation coming somewhere, or new enforcement coming from somewhere. There's always something to keep up with. And it's a very fast-paced, tech in general is always a very fast-paced industry, always evolving, and we have no alternative but to keep up with that. I think coming from a Portuguese legal culture, but also from a Macanese legal culture, we don't tend to specialize. So when you specialize on something, people always find it a bit weird. And I have to say that even those my age, sometimes even my husband looks at me, why? Why do you like that? But I do. I really enjoy it. It gives me, from a personal perspective, I have the ability of dealing with people from very different backgrounds, very different areas. It's always a challenge. Yes, we do get the same question twice, but they always come back with a twist so that we cannot just apply the answer that we did before. So it's always a new challenge every day, a new perspective, and it's fun. I mean, at the end of the day, when you go through these scares of, is it an incident? Are we okay? And then you're okay, and you go out for a drink. It's like, it's gone, we're done. It's a really rewarding career as well. It's a very rewarding profession. Difficult, I cannot say it's not. It's tough. It needs adaptability, endurance, stamina, patience, but also humility. You need to be humble enough to accept that you do not know everything. You for sure cannot cover everything. So you need to make sure that you create that own village around you. So it's very rewarding in all of these aspects, I say. So it's I think a good role.
Yes, as the co-chair of the IAPP Hong Kong chapter, I need to promote a bit about IAPP because IAPP is the community for people to join and to learn together. IAPP is I think the biggest as a community for the data privacy professional globally. So we have a chapter in Hong Kong, and I'm happy to see Daniela taking the CIPP CN and more people taking the CIPP certificate to join the IAPP community. I think that's very important. And myself, I'm also trying to promote my podcast because I'm running a podcast about data privacy on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and some mainland China channel. I want to build this DPO network for China as well. So that's the way how you learn. So be part of a network, be part of the community. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to, I believe the audience might agree with me how much this panel has been down on earth, bringing very practical insights and explaining it in the form of a story where we could really enjoy and even have that desire, despite the fact that there are some challenges, some difficulties in being DPO, but I believe it's a really an important topic that you made very easy to understand. You share exactly what you go on your day-to-day basis, what you do, what's the learning that is taking place. And with the great moderation also, of course, of Grasa, I personally really enjoyed this conversation. I would like to start. Usually I'm supposed to give the microphone, but I will start. Probably some people will follow suit. A few questions regarding Philippa first. I know you operate in different jurisdictions, and sometimes you have different legislations on the different laws on data protection. How do you navigate in those different legislations so that you can perform your job properly? That's the first questions. And Daniela, you mentioned Macau legislation on data protections is very simplistic, easy. But we know sometimes one of the difficulty, the fact that the law remains general, it might be subject to different interpretations in regarding the implementations. So what can we do right now? Because we know compared to EU with more detail, and some other countries also laws are very detailed, a lot of implementation measures, right? So, and I believe Macau may have also many implementation measures or only guidelines that exist, which sometimes are not binding by natures, right? So maybe you can take us through there. And my question to Shandy, it's about the standard contractual clause that we have to facilitate the cross-border data transfer between China in the GBA. But correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more, because when I look at the thing, it's more like Hong Kong, China, Macau, China. It's not the other way around, right? What's the reason for that? So maybe you can start and we move this way.
think that's a very good question. So people look at the data flow at both way, right? Why does GBA-SC only cover the data flow out from mainland China to Hong Kong or mainland China to Macau? That's because the cross-border data transfer restrictions based on the PIPL, the China Data Protection Law. So this facilitation is helping people to get the easy way to comply with the PIPL. And also, as Philippa also mentioned, the Section 33 of the PDPO, the law in Hong Kong, is not in operation. So there's no restriction in Hong Kong to control the data flow out of Hong Kong to elsewhere. And it's very interesting for this GBA-SC arrangement, even though there's no restriction restricting data flow out of Hong Kong to elsewhere, but if you commit to this GBA-SC, you need to sign a contract to commit that the data will stay within the GBA area. Yes, I hope I answered your question. Yeah.
For mine, it's a very interesting question and a dilemma that those of us who deal with more than one jurisdiction often have to, with very different requirements, often have to deal with. There's two ways. The hardest way, I think, is you just focus on each jurisdiction and you do what it is for each one. That becomes very complicated very fast when you have quite a few numbers. I'm not saying it's not the easiest way. I think it's the best practices would say that you would find your most common denominator, so your standard, and then apply that regardless of whether in a particular in a particular jurisdiction, a particular market, it's going to be the standard there. That helps in context of MNC, so multinational corporations that work globally. The only way we can work as a group is if you have a standard line. That's where your privacy compliance program comes in, where you establish what is your risk appetite, what is the level of compliance you want to enable, and what exactly your standards are. It's sounds very nice theoretically, but the pushback that you get is on the business side, because then you will have someone from Macau asking, why do I have to do this assessment if it's not, we don't have assessments under Macau law? So it's very hard to explain then why we're applying a criteria. Or you try to get a global doc and say, okay, this is the template that we're using for Asia, but this doesn't follow my law. Yes, I know that, but it has a nicer standard, but our law doesn't say that. Well, and it's still a bit of a debate, also a very lot of convincing to try and make sure that the teams on the ground understand that regardless of what you have on that specific local legislation, that the best for the group as a whole is a standard. So yeah, you have to find that standard and stick to it.
Don't you also have a binding contractual clause that's established by the group, and all the subsidiary goes and implement it as binding norms within the group? Not
necessarily. There are in the various legislations around the world, but in particular, say the EU, or you also have those in Singapore, for instance. But the binding corporate rules sometimes require regulator approval. So you don't want to go and do that. It's a very long process. So you end up building a framework based on policies, guidelines, SOPs. That will become the global standards, your internal corporate rules, even if they are not the binding corporate rules as they come up in various legislation. So it's the approach that you get that way. But even so, they will challenge. Even if you showed them, I'm pretty sure, a very fantastic contract, binding in bold red letters, highlighted in yellow, 50,000 stamps and little things coming out of it, they would still challenge why. They would still challenge that. And it's a good thing, because it gets you thinking of, is it right? Is it not? And this is also why we keep on changing as well.
You were saying that Macau legislation is indeed very simple, definitely the simplest between all three jurisdictions. So indeed, there are a lot of difficulties for us when we are trying to implement the law. Our first approach is to try to interpret the law as much as possible. And when we have any questions regarding that, we will consult the regulator's website, where we sometimes, very rare times to be honest, we will have some guidelines from the regulator on specific subjects. For instance, there is a guideline regarding the use of fingerprints for employees. or the installation of cameras on vehicles. That is also one of the guidelines. And when we do not get the response from there, we just pick up the phone and try to get the PDPB's general view on the subject. And then we try to advise our clients as much as possible based on that.
Yes.
So I'm very curious about the Macau business side of this, because just now you mentioned that the responsibility falls into major infrastructure. When an attack or something happened, they have to report. So, but in some cases, some business, they can have a lot of personal data through the CRM. It's like yeah. So does it mean that if they don't do anything about cybersecurity, they are safe because the responsibility will fall through the service provider, the infrastructure side of the industry?
So basically, I think the question should be, who was the entity that actually suffered the cybersecurity incident? So if you were the entity that suffered that incident, you would, and if you are an operator of critical infrastructure, you would have the reporting requirement under the cybersecurity law.
But how about if I'm a SMC, like a small SME, like a small medium-sized enterprise, but I have a CRM system that I have a lot of customer data, and they're like, and I was being attacked. So if I don't do anything about cybersecurity, if I don't hire an expert,
I get what you mean. No, the answer is you're still liable. So even if it's the Macau data protection law, and if you look at it from the okay, so the cybersecurity law wouldn't be applicable to a small, medium enterprise, because obviously it's not one of the critical infrastructure companies. So you can take that one out, and you don't need to think about it. However, if you are processing personal data, even in Macau under our very simplified regime, you are required to keep that data safe. So there is a requirement for you to keep to have standards, worry about cybersecurity, and you will be held responsible if you don't uphold those standards. So it will be from. There is no direct provision on the cybersecurity part that will be applicable to you, but to your CRM, yes, you will have those requirements of safeguarding your data under the Data Protection Act.
Even if you hire a third party
Exactly.
to do that on your behalf, because you are the one in control of the data, you are the data controller, and the third party would be providing you a service on your behalf, and you have the duty to select them well and make an assessment as to whether or not they are in a condition to provide you a secure solution. So there's no cybersecurity per se coming from the cybersecurity law, but there's requirements for any data controller that owns or controls personal information to maintain that information secure.
thank you very much.
I think if you agree with me, we should call tonight's session the Journey of Data Protection Officer Part 1. And because I think it's really interesting. There's so many things that are involved in this field of data protections and the work of data protection officer. But of course, as we are bound by the time, allow me to share our certificates of appreciation to our speakers. So I will start with Sandy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
No, I don't need to speak.
It's just a photo.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
So, our second. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And last but not the least, our
you.
great moderator.
Thank you.
I think you two should take a group photo now. With the certificate.
Maybe you keep. Maybe you
Yes, please. The light is killing me.
Yes.
We need the lights.
Maybe we
Maybe go
do.
back a little bit. Should I
Or maybe
pull
it's...
this one?
Why, thank you.
Yeah.
We went to the university.
Thank you.
Francisco, yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have also a souvenir for you.
Just to take a memory.
Wow,
of,
that's perfect. Thank you.
Obrigada, doutor.
yes,
Wow.
okay.
Obrigada.